Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to look at the Trijicon RMR HD. Is it worth buying, and should you replace the RMR Type 2 with it? Let's get into it. Here we have the RMR Type 2 mounted to a Glock 45, and we have the RMR HD mounted to the Staccato C. You will notice the obvious difference in terms of the overall length and the height. The HD is also slightly wider as well. So we'll go ahead and rip these off of these pistols, and so we can just look at them individually. So here are my main pros and cons with the RMR Type 2. There are already a ton of videos on YouTube that cover this topic, so I'll keep it brief. So the main pro for me for the Type 2 is durability. This thing has basically earned the reputation as the most durable pistol red dot out there, and this was the main driver for me personally. There are a ton of videos out there where dudes, torture test this thing and it doesn't sweat it. So that was the main pro for me. The other one was profile, actually. It does have a relatively short profile, so it's less of a snag potential. The obvious flip side to that coin is that the window now is actually shorter and therefore a little bit smaller to look through. Let's talk cons. So as you probably already know, it's been well covered, the main con to this thing is the fact that you got to take it off to remove and replace the battery. So that kind of sucks. For me, that's not that big a deal. Having to do it once a year is not a huge ask to re-zero it. I think the main thing that comes into play there is you're constantly unthreading and rethreading in the screws, and anytime you do that, there's always a risk of stripping something out, whether that be the screw head or creating damage to the slide. The next con is window size. This came out in 2017, and since then, the pistol dot game has moved forward substantially, and there are a ton of other makes and models and manufacturers that provide much larger viewing windows. And the last con and thing that I don't really like about the RMR Type 2 is the glass tint. So it does have a very distinct bluish greenish hue to it, and it's quite noticeable, especially when you look back to back through like a holosun. It is very distinct. However, you get used to it pretty quick, and when you just look through the RMR Type 2, it kind of goes away and it doesn't really become that big a deal. So how does the new HD stack up when compared to the Type 2? Well, from a durability standpoint, it seems to be on par, but it's too early yet to tell. There have been some videos where dudes have torture tested the HD and it's done well, but again, it's just too early to tell. We need real time to understand how people using this in a duty capacity, police, military, how this thing is actually holding up. And that will only come with time, but there is such a design congruence in terms of materials and just general design philosophy that I would be surprised if there was any sort of degradation from a durability perspective going from the Type 2 to the HD. Next up, profile. Now, this gets back to that double-edged sword I was talking about earlier with the Type 2. To get that removable battery on top, you have to make, basically the sight has to grow such that you can effectively and completely enclose the 2032 battery. As a result, the sight is taller. So from a profile and snag perspective, that's somewhat of a downside. However, this is where I think the big improvement in the sight comes in. As a result of the taller profile, the Trijicon engineers were able to effectively translate the viewing window superiorly or away from the slide. By shifting the RMR window up, we avoid looking at this back shelf. This back shelf actually occludes a good portion of the Type 2's viewing window. And you can see on the HD, when we look, that back shelf is completely clear of the viewing window since we've been able to shift it upward. And I'll switch over into CAD to better illustrate this. If I look at this from the front, Normally, you can't see this type of view because the front glass has the sort of kind of reflective coating on it. But you can see in this clear glass representation how much of the shelf is sitting above the bottom of the viewing window. We're losing quite a bit of space there. And if we measure that, it's actually about 150 thousandths of essentially wasted viewing window. And we'll look at this cross section. This also illustrates it quite nicely. And again, the distance from the top of this shelf to the bottom of the viewing window is about 150 thousandths. Now we'll look at the size of the windows between the Type 2 and the HD. If I measure the glass width and height, there's very little increase from the Type 2 to the HD. There is a slight increase in both dimensions, but it's very small. So the last thing to talk about with the HD is the glass. So unfortunately, the bluish green tint doesn't seem to have been really improved at all. It seems to be about the same bluish green color. Sometimes when I look through it, it seems to be less bluish green, but I think it's somewhat of an optical illusion. When I look at the edge of the glass in the viewing window in the Type 2, I do see a decent amount of sort of distortion or abnormalities kind of at those extreme edges when viewing off axis. That seems to be improved on the HD. So I think that's just due to the fact that they were able to just ever so slightly change the curvature on kind of like the main and secondary glass that that has reduced the sort of edge abnormalities a little bit. Other improvements going from the Type 2 to the HD, the physical buttons themselves aren't really any larger. However, there is no tactility on these Type 2 buttons. They're kind of shitty. With the Type 2 though, they have a different membrane switch, it appears, underneath, and when you click it, you can hear it. The auto brightness system now has this front-facing light sensor, which supposedly makes the auto brightness better and more reactive, but I honestly haven't really dug into it that far yet to really know if that's an improvement. I typically just set them to a brightness I like and lock it out anyway, so I don't know how much of that is a pro for me. The other thing that the HD provides is some different reticle options, and I don't have it turned on with this guy, I just run the dots on these. But you do have the circle dot option now with the HD. Mine is just the 1 MOA version, so you get a 55 MOA ring and a 1 MOA dot in the center. So if the circle dot is important to you and you want RMR durability, this is really the only way to go. All right, we've talked about the HD in comparison and relatively to the RMR Type 2. And I've mounted it back on the Staccato C here just so you can get one final look at it. And I think it does look very aesthetically pleasing. Obviously that shouldn't be an important factor for what you choose with a pistol dot, but it does look great. The one minor concern I had was how the HD hangs over the ejection port just slightly. You can see here, it's not much. In the manual, they do tell you to not do this, but I have tested it now and I'll splice in some crappy slow-mo footage of it firing, and I haven't had any issues yet. So to close out this video, I'll answer the question I asked at the beginning. Is the RMR HD a buy? And I would say emphatically yes. I currently think it's the best overall pistol red dot out there, at least for me. Would I replace the RMR Type 2 with the RMR HD? For me, I would not. The RMR Type 2 still does a fine job, and I have no plans of replacing mine with the HDs. All that being said, the RMR HD is very expensive and it's pretty hard to find. So if it's beyond your price point, I would look at something more in the sort of Holosun range. I own several Holosuns myself, and you can get a lot for your dollar when it comes to those products. That does kind of bring up the question, it's made in China. That is one thing I do like about Trijicon products. They are made in America, and you know, sometimes Americans have to shell out a little more coin to help American manufacturing and American jobs. Well, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.